Your doctor told you to keep an eye on it, and some part of you assumed that meant he knew something he wasn't saying. He didn't. That phrase isn't an explanation. It never was. A large population study that followed tens of thousands of men for years found that most of them will see this exact number rise steadily after 60, and almost none of them will ever hear the real reason why. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot for 11 minutes after my last appointment, keys in my hand, engine off, because I genuinely could not make myself turn the key. My number had climbed again. Nobody in that building had told me what it actually meant, only that it went up. What that number really measures isn't what you've been told, and I'm going to walk you through it. I'm 83 now, and I still get that number checked every single year, right on schedule. The difference is I read the result calmly these days, fold the paper, and go make coffee.
Perfect.
Last month, I drove myself 4 hours to see my grandson's college graduation, something I would have talked myself out of years ago over nothing more than a fear I never understood. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because I sat frozen in a parking lot once too, and I wish someone had reached me sooner. I remember the drive home that day in pieces, not as one continuous memory. I remember gripping the wheel too tight at a red light. I remember my wife asking from the kitchen how it went, and me saying, fine, because I didn't actually have an answer to give her, just a number and 11 minutes of silence I'd already spent alone in a parking lot before I even walked through our front door. That's the part nobody warns you about. It isn't the appointment itself that gets you, it's the after, the drive, the dinner table, the specific way a number sits in your chest for days while you wait for someone to tell you what it means. And nobody does, because the appointment is already over and the next patient is already sitting in the chair you just left. I'd turn that number over and over in my head at night, certain it was building towards something I wasn't ready to hear. I recited it to myself the way you'd recite a bad grade, a verdict, something handed down rather than something explained. And that's exactly the trap. A rising number was treated like a sentence when it was never actually explained as anything at all. Here's what took me embarrassingly long to learn on my own. That number was never a measurement of cancer. It's a measurement of your prostate, full stop. It rises for a whole list of ordinary reasons that have nothing to do with the worst-case scenario sitting in the back of your mind at 2 a.m. Age itself causes it to rise. A benign, natural enlargement of the gland causes it to rise. Everyday inflammation, even something as unremarkable as a recent long car ride or a minor irritation, can nudge that number upward temporarily. None of that is the disease you've been quietly bracing for. I understand why nobody sits you down and explains this properly. Your doctor has roughly 8 minutes with you, and in those 8 minutes, there's blood pressure, cholesterol, whatever new complaint you brought in that day, and only then, if there's time left, the number that's actually kept you up at night. There usually isn't time left. It isn't malice, it's arithmetic. But a shrug dressed up as, we'll keep an eye on it, isn't an explanation, and it isn't reassurance either. It's just a postponement, and it lands on you the same way it landed on me, alone in a parked car, unable to turn the key. That 8-minute math is the same reason so many men get funneled onto a testing conveyor belt they never fully understood the terms of. One slightly elevated result leading to another test, then a referral, then a conversation about a biopsy, each step feeling more urgent than the last, when in the majority of cases the honest explanation was sitting right there the whole time and simply never got said out loud. I'm not telling you the system is lying to you. I'm telling you it's rushed, and rushed is its own kind of harm when the stakes feel this personal. What finally gave me peace wasn't a different number. It was understanding what the number was actually built to measure in the first place, and what it was never designed to tell me at all. For years, one number ran my life, the PSA. It would tick up a point, and I'd lie awake the whole night, certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer. It measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they push to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. The habit that changed things for me wasn't a pill, and it wasn't some rare root shipped from overseas. It was something almost embarrassingly ordinary. Walking. Every single day, for real, not just puttering around the yard. A large long-term study that tracked tens of thousands of health professionals over years found that men who stayed regularly active reported meaningfully fewer urinary symptoms and less progression of prostate enlargement over time than men who stayed sedentary. The proposed mechanism has to do with the body's stress response. Regular movement is associated with lower sympathetic nervous system activity, and that lower baseline tension appears tied to a calmer, more comfortable prostate as men age. I want to be precise about what that means and what it doesn't mean, because precision is exactly what I never got from anyone else. Walking doesn't touch that lab number. It isn't aimed at your screening result at all, and anyone who tells you a daily walk will bring your number down is promising something the research never claimed. What it's aimed at is comfort, the actual felt experience of living inside an aging body, the trips to the bathroom, the pressure, the general unease that comes from carrying tension in a body you've stopped trusting. I started with 20 minutes most mornings, nothing dramatic, just before the day got busy enough for me to talk myself out of it. I picked a loop near the house so I never had to decide where to go, because decisions are exactly where good intentions go to die. Some mornings it rained and I did laps around the kitchen and living room instead, which felt silly at first and then just felt like keeping a promise to myself. I didn't do it alone, and I don't think you should either. I added a small handful of things around the walking, built as a system rather than one lonely habit standing by itself. I cut back on the fried food and the heavily processed meat that seemed to leave me more bloated and uncomfortable the next day, since that kind of eating carries its own inflammatory load that research has linked to worse urinary symptoms in men with an enlarged prostate. I started spacing my water out earlier in the day instead of drinking most of it after dinner, which made a real difference in how many times I was up at night. And I kept my yearly number checked, every single year, without exception, because none of this replaces that appointment. It just makes the years between appointments feel like mine again, instead of borrowed time spent waiting for bad news. I gave the walking close to 6 weeks before I trusted what I was noticing rather than dismissing it as wishful thinking. The nights improved before anything else did. Fewer trips, less of that dull pressure that used to wake me before my alarm ever did. Nobody handed me a chart proving it. I just started sleeping through more nights than not, and eventually that stopped feeling like luck and started feeling like a pattern I'd actually built. These days, my wife and I take that same walking loop together most evenings. No particular pace, no destination, just talking about nothing important the way we used to before I let a number quietly take over how I felt about my own body. Some nights we walk further than we planned to, and neither of us notices until we're back at our own front door. I think about a man named Doyle who left a comment describing almost the exact same 11 minutes I'd spent frozen in that parking lot, except his had happened in a hospital garage instead of a clinic lot, and he'd sat there for closer to 20. Doyle was 69, recently retired, and told me his doctor had used the same 3 words mine had. "We'll monitor it," with the same rushed, well-meaning tone that explains nothing while sounding like it explains everything. Doyle told me what finally moved him wasn't a supplement or anything dramatic. It was reading, on his own time, that his rising number was overwhelmingly likely to be ordinary age-related enlargement, rather than the thing he'd been silently bracing for since his appointment. He said that alone let him breathe for the first time in weeks. Then, almost as an afterthought, he started walking every morning before his coffee, mostly because he needed somewhere to put the nervous energy he used to spend rehearsing worst-case conversations in his head. Doyle wrote back a few months later to say the walking had become the best part of his day rather than a chore he forced himself through, and that he still got his number checked every year exactly as scheduled, just without the dread that used to build for weeks beforehand. He said the appointment itself hadn't changed at all. He had. If you take one medication or several for your prostate, your blood pressure, or your heart, please hear this clearly. Nothing here replaces your treatment, and nothing here replaces your regular screening. Never stop or adjust a medication on your own, and never skip a scheduled test because you're feeling calmer. Keep getting your number checked every single year with your doctor, without exception, exactly as scheduled, precisely because peace of mind and continued monitoring were never in competition with each other in the first place. Here's what I settled on: a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once: the growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact, none of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video, go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. What I want you to walk away with is this: an enlarged prostate is not cancer, and having one does not raise your cancer risk. The number you've been quietly reciting to yourself for years measures the size and condition of your prostate, not a verdict on your life. Your doctor's 8 minutes will probably never stretch long enough to say that plainly, so I'm saying it here instead, as clearly as I know how. I think about the man who sat frozen in that parking lot, keys in hand, too shaken by a piece of paper to turn the engine over. And I think about the man I am now, who reads the same kind of result calmly, folds it, and drives himself home without 11 wasted minutes standing between him and his own front door. That's not a cure for anything. It's just what it feels like to finally understand what you're actually looking at. If a doctor has ever handed you a number with no real explanation attached, and you've sat with that silence longer than you'd like to admit, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if an honest explanation like this one is worth something to you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more of this coming every week, for anyone else still sitting quietly with a number they were never actually taught how to understand.